and gentlemen, welcome to the Good Roads Podcast. I am Jared LeMay, and we are continuing the summer of Jared on the show as I host the show solo over the summer months with Mr. Thomas on vacation. Today we're diving into a topic that's crucial for every municipality and something I'm sure nobody really wants to talk about right now. As we approach the winter months, we're going to be talking about the winter. So today we're going to be getting into winter maintenance, whether it's keeping our roads clear, ensuring the safety of our communities, or managing the logistical challenges that come with snow and ice. Winter maintenance is no small task. To help us understand the ins and outs of this critical work, I'm thrilled to welcome two experts from Good Roads Snow School. These instructors, or directors if I'm not mistaken, right? have spent years on the front lines mastering the art of and the science of winter road maintenance. Darnell Bernardo, the supervisor of roads administration for Norfolk County, and Scott Holmes, the city of Mississauga, with an extremely long title, senior manager of works, operations, maintenance, and much, much more, are here to share their knowledge, insight, and best practices for keeping our roads safe and functional during even the harshest of winter conditions. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, let's. So first of all, you're both in snow school, and as we all know, that's a very, very important program for municipalities. I guess we're going to start off very, very simple. Winter maintenance in a municipal setting, that's going to be a lot more different than if you were, say, like just a plow driver cleaning out driveways and parking lots and whatnot. Can you explain what the ins and outs are for a municipal setting? What Snow School brings to that, and I guess how you guys approach it?
Well, I can start us off if you want. So yeah. With us in Mississauga, it's we have a very large road network that we have to deal with. We actually have 5,700 lane kilometers that we look after.
Wow.
And about 93% of our winter operations is actually contracted out. You have to balance that in-house contracting out, depending on the size of your municipality, depending on the size of your road network. Then you kind of set up contracts, you set up routes based on what you've got, whether it's the roads, sidewalks, bus stops, bike lanes, any of that nature that you've got for your infrastructure, and work with the teams to be able to meet your levels of service, and also keeping in mind the minimum maintenance standards that are in place when it comes to snow and ice clearing, right. Making sure that your levels of service are matching or exceeding what the minimum maintenance standard has.
So contracting out a lot of that's a whole other aspect to this too, because you've got people that aren't necessarily working under you, but working for you.
Correct.
And you're responsible for their actions. First of all, you've got MMS, like you said, and you've got to make sure these people are, and you've got contracts in place too that you've got to figure out. So you've got all of these other balls you've got up in the air that you're juggling on top of the snow removal and the snow planning.
Yeah, and we rarely interact directly with the operator of the contractor. We'll deal with the supervisor or the manager, and then they're training their staff to operate the equipment. They're supposed to come to us fully qualified and able to operate the equipment. We do have an orientation that we provide every year for our contractors on what our expectations are and best practices to be able to get through the different events that they look after.
Cool. And I'm guessing, do they ever have? Do you ever recommend Snow School to these contractors? Would that be something good for them as well?
It'd be good for anybody that is involved in any kind of winter operation, whether you're taking a phone call or the plow operator or a supervisor. It's good knowledge and good modules that give you a broad breadth of what's involved with winter operations.
Fantastic. And Darnell, you've got to be taking, I guess, not really the opposite approach. You probably take a lot of what Scott does, but you're in I guess what would be considered a smaller municipality, maybe a more rural one in Norfolk.
Yeah, so we have about 2,400 centerline kilometers of roadway. I'd say probably anywhere from 70% is rural. So big contrast from Scott, right? So even the challenges of dealing with rural roads versus urban roads, we get into the whole blowing snow, especially we are right off of Lake Erie, right? So all of our waterfront communities, we get hit really hard with that, with the drifting of snow, with the winds, right? We get a lot of the winds coming off of Lake Erie. This past winter, we had one snow event where we were sending out employees to actually help out the OPP because they were stuck on roadways.
Really?
The poor employees driving these loaders, their comments were the only way they knew they were on the roadway was they could visually see every once in a while the hydro poles along the ditch line, and that's how they more or less guided themselves down the center of the road. That's how bad it was. We got to the point where we had to pull off plows off the roadways and stuff like that, and these drivers went out and did a little bit of risky driving just to help out a couple of OPP officers that got stuck, right? So
I remember, little aside, when I was younger doing rep hockey, we were driving through the Peterborough area going to a playoff game, and it was just as bad as you're saying for snow. And I said to my dad, I'm like, just turn around, let's go home. It's not worth it. He's like, if I could see the road, if I knew where the road was, I would turn around right now. But no, I know exactly what you're going through. And I guess with being, again, a more rural community, you've got different challenges with the different road types as well. Like Mississauga probably has a lot more paved surfaces. Norfolk probably has a bunch of gravel roads and unpaved.
Actually, we are down to approximately, I want to say 10, 15 kilometers left of gravel roads.
Oh, nice.
Norfolk had an in-house surface treatment program that we ran for many years. We're on our second year that now we've been out of it and have gone the contract route. But yeah, we knocked off a lot of our gravel roads. But surface treated roads are still a challenge just because of blades, right? You're going from a paved surface to a surface treated surface. Your plow blades become an issue because you don't want to be shaving off the fresh chip and seal that you did this past summer, right? So and then having to do it again. So there are challenges. We are different from Scott in the sense that we are mostly in-house.
Okay.
We're probably about 65% in-house, 35% contracted. And our contractors run primarily all of our major roadways, so any of our class 2s and our higher class 3s. And then our in-house staff takes care of our class 4s, 5s, and even any of the 6s that we do any kind of maintenance on.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's something I didn't think about when before we even started this podcast was contracting out. And I guess that leads into my next question about preparation and planning. There's a whole other aspect to that. I mean, I guess, how would you guys typically prepare for a winter season? I guess now that you've got contracts as well that you've got to deal with, that's a whole other level. And I guess salt planning and things like that, I guess determining what type of roads you have versus like your pressure treated your sealed versus your what's the word, asphalt. There's a lot to consider there. How do you guys go about doing this?
So we always joke we're pretty much talking winter 12 months of the year. It doesn't matter what the month is. There's something that you're doing to prepare, to change, to modify, to get ready for the next winter season or even a new contract, because the way it is with any kind of pieces of equipment, including cars, for these contractors to get new plows and equipment, you could have anywhere from a 18-month to 36-month leeway before they can actually get the equipment.
Oh, really?
So you have to plan your procurements to give them time to be able to get any new equipment, because depending on your specifications, you might ask for no older than a 7 or a 10-year vehicle.
Right.
And if they don't have that in their fleet, then they have to buy new equipment. So you have to give them the lead time to be able to do that. So you're always thinking well ahead when it comes to winter, depending on your contractors,
right,
for the big contract. Because I have almost 500 pieces of equipment in our contracts, the various contracts that we have for winter operations, from the big plows to the brine equipment to the snow clearing for sidewalks, bus stops, multi-use trails, any of that stuff. So it's quite onerous, and we have to stay on top of things to be able to make sure that everything is there. And then you mentioned even the salt in your brine. You want to make sure that you've got all your product topped up.
Yeah.
Normally we do that, especially the salt at the end of the season.
Okay.
Get a little bit better of a price before the prices change in the next year of the
and
contract.
that stuff holds for a while?
Yeah, it's not a problem as long as you've got it in your domes that's sealed. It'll last. There's no issues with that. So
excellent.
So a lot of prep work 12 months of the year.
Yeah, we always joke it's you get done the one season and you start preparing for the next, right?
Wow.
So when our winter control season ends April 15th, April 16th, you're looking at November 15th for the next season, right? You start doing your plan. And one approach in Norfolk we've changed, and we're following more what Scott's done is end of season top ups, right?
Right.
We used to do all of our dome filling at the beginning of the season, just before the season starts. And we just found it was a lot easier. Winter gets done, top them right up, fill them up. And so you're not worrying about any kind of shortages or anything like that at the beginning of the season, where some other municipalities are doing what we used to do, right?
Yeah.
So you're not fighting for those trucks, right? So, and then you're just set that way, right?
Yeah. Well, and then if you happen to get one of those like magical April, May snowstorms, you're already prepared.
Or September, October.
September, October.
October, we've had them in October, right?
We're not going to jinx it this year. I enjoyed winter too much last year with it being nice and mild. All right. We talked a little bit about safety and training. Is there anything else you guys do besides snow school for training? I know snow school is a great step towards getting your fleet ready, but is there anything else? I know there's snow school for mechanics that we also do that gets your mechanics ready for taking care of those. Is there anything else out there that any of your staff may benefit from?
So us in Norfolk, one of the things we do is any new employees that we have, first requirement is to attend snow school.
Okay.
So that's their first step is, especially nowadays, we're getting a lot of what we'll call rookie or inexperienced winter drivers, right? And could be they could have been trucking for 30 years, but they've never been in a piece of winter equipment, right?
Right.
Or we have the young people who are literally getting into it and haven't experienced it yet either, right? So we find sending them through snow school right off the get-go gives them that little bit of background and understanding of not just the equipment, but the weather aspects.
Yeah.
Why their managers are making the decisions that they're making and telling them what to do and stuff like that, right? And then after that, we also have a yearly in-house one-day training session that we do, basically a refresher. Every year we change the topics depending on the flavor of the year, right? So if there's something new that's come out in the industry, we'll gear towards that, or refresher course of something else that we haven't spoken of over a few years, because again, we're having quite a bit of staff turnover, right? So it makes things easier that way. And then just your day-to-day training, right, as they're on the roadways and in the early seasons, because again, you spend all summer doing something else and all of a sudden you hop in your plow truck again. It's like, oh, wait a minute, how do these things work again, right? So there's always that ongoing training, no matter what.
Yeah, and keep people refreshed and everything like that. And you mentioned turnover as well, and I guess like with the retirement issue too, we've been talking about this actually since I started, is that like 50% of municipal employees are ready for retirement in the next 5 or 10 years. So, I mean, you've got to be losing a lot of people to retirement, moving on to other jobs, so on and so forth, and you've got to keep them fresh and up to date.
Yeah, retirements are tough. We're almost finding that our retirements aren't what's really killing us anymore. It's we find that the younger generation just doesn't have that we'll say commitment to stick to an employer, right? The years of, hey, I worked for the same employer for 35 years and then I retired. We find that the younger generation, they'll jump, right? They'll be with someone for 1-2 years and, I'm going to try going over here. And even move, right? They move throughout the province, their dynamics of family or whatever. So we're finding that getting the entry level is becoming a lot difficult and retaining them.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds more like a retention problem.
Yep.
Because I mean, I know in the private industry, a lot of people are. I can understand in the private industry because everybody wants to pay people as little as possible. But I mean, people have to realize that municipalities do pay well, and it may not necessarily be your paycheck at the end of the day that's bigger than everybody else's, but all the benefits and perks you get from it, and the ability to affect on the ground like your community is huge. And I mean, that's something that they've got to take away from this, as opposed to just, hey, where can I get my next bigger paycheck?
It's tough. Some people look at that dollar figure, right? And I always tell people, you get paid well in a municipality, you do have those perks.
Yeah.
But if you're going to compare yourself to one of your friends who's working in the private sector, if you start comparing hours at the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
Who's putting in more hours? So they could be making a little bit more money than you are.
Yeah.
But they're also putting in double the hours that you're doing, right? So we have shorter days, we have easier days, right? In the private sector, you're not guaranteed a 8 to 5 shift, right?
Yeah.
You could be working 6, depending on the projects that you're on, 7, right? And usually in a municipal sector, you have your set hours, right? And I mean, there's the overtime for our drivers, stuff like that, when winter events, but for the most part, they know what time they start and they know what time they're going home, right?
Well, then there's benefits in retirement on top of
Yep.
that. I mean, municipal retirement's one of the best in the province. I think the teachers' fund's probably the top, but like municipalities right underneath that. Where else can you get that?
Yep, exactly.
But
Yeah, the other thing, we've done everything similar to what Darnell had mentioned, and also utilizing our experienced, well-trained drivers to be able to help guide and mentor the
that's a good
younger
idea,
ones,
yeah.
which is really good.
yeah, I mean, well, sorry, just to jump in there, like with retirement, you've got all that knowledge going out the door, and I mean, if you can use it for the next generation, and they can, even if they can help with the retention thing too, like, hey, this is a great place to work. Don't just jump ship, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really good idea.
And also similar to what Darnell mentioned, the younger generation, when you tell them, yeah, you can come work for the city, but in the winter we might call you at 2 a.m. to come and plow a road in the middle of a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Not too many people are putting their hand up in the air to kind of come and do that, even though they're paid overtime, they're paid other things. It's not something that the kids that are going through high school or college are maybe thinking about. So
I'm kind of curious about that, the detail, like just getting into the nitty gritty about that too. You mentioned calling them at like 2 a.m. Have you ever thought of like rolling shifts, like 12-hour shifts on days, 12 hours? How does that compare to just having somebody on call and then giving them a call at 2 a.m?
So you need the capacity to be able to do that.
Okay.
This will be our third winter where we actually added a second shift, an afternoon shift.
Right.
Other municipalities in our area, in Peel and Brampton, they actually do run 3 shifts during the week.
Okay.
But you need the bodies to be able to do that.
Right.
And because we've had a lot of the stuff contracted out, we don't have the in-house bodies to be able to do 3.
Okay.
But we feel 2 shifts will work really, really well. We'd be covered from basically 7:30 in the morning until midnight. And then we kind of share the overtime between the 2 shifts. The midnight shift would stay till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then we bring in the morning shift a few hours early, so everybody gets the benefits. And you also have to look at and watch your hours of service and how many hours of driving that they're doing. Right. So they're capped at 14 on duty and 13 driving in a 24-hour period. So
Okay.
So that's, you got to balance that as you're doing all of your operations as
Oh,
well.
that's all preparation and planning too, right?
Yeah.
We're taking it right back there. All right. Yeah. So, I guess with moving on in years, we're looking at new equipment and technology. Is there anything out there that you guys have seen that has like really piqued your curiosity, or you got it in house and you're like, wow, how did I live without that? I mean, it doesn't even have to be like a truck or an attachment to a truck, but I mean like new salts, the brines. I know brines are, I guess in the grand scheme of things, relatively new.
They are. Things have kind of plateaued a bit over the past, 5-7 years in the way of new technologies. We did a really big jump, like when we came up with combo plows, and all of a sudden we got into pre-wetting, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, now we have this brine. Oh, we gotta have additives to brine, right? So that's where beet juice came from, or make chlorides or calcium chlorides in liquid format, and then treated salt. But ever since that stuff has kind of been on the market, we haven't really seen anything like wow factor right now.
Okay.
Not to say that it's not going to come. Europe is a big proponent when it comes to winter technologies as well.
Right.
They've gotten into heated sand, where they actually put down heated sand on the roadways.
That's interesting.
So that it actually embeds into their hard pack and gives it almost like that sandpaper effect right on the surface, and losing that blowing. But we haven't seen anything like that coming this way. We went the years of rear discharge, and people are kind of getting away from the rear discharge and basically using them more on our 400 series highways. Some people tried them out in the rural areas, but complaints were we weren't getting any kind of traction underneath the drive wheels or anything, because it's all shooting out the back, where when it's a mid truck spinner, it gets under your tires, so the truck itself still always has traction, right? So, but yeah, I don't think, not that I've heard of anything crazy that's really come out in the past couple years.
Probably more only on the telematics and the GPS has been very, very helpful.
Okay.
To help you with your route optimization, to find out where the vehicles are going, if they are working or not. Because you can set up alerts to let you know if this certain truck has stopped for a certain amount of period of time.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that piece has really, really helped. But Darnell's right, on the technology side, it's kind of hit that wall for a little bit. with when it comes to the truck and the actual operation, but there is the technology that's there on the telematics side. Yeah. So
well, that's got to be interesting too with the GPS. I mean, you guys probably don't have to deal with this. This is probably the legal section, but I mean, lawsuits and whatnot. When my dad worked in public works a long time ago, he had GPS in his trucks, and I remember that it took lawsuits from like 200 a year down to 2 because people would call in and say, my road wasn't plowed and I ran into a tree, it's your fault. And he could pull up the routes. I remember him asking me to download the routes onto a CD so he could have them for the previous season for when people were upset. I'm dating myself here because I'm using CDs. But yeah, no, they'd call up and they'd be like, yeah, I ran into this tree, my road wasn't plowed. And he'd pull it up in court and say, well, there's the plow going by an hour before you hit that tree. So
yeah, that still happens. It really helps with our mitigating the litigations that we get.
Right.
And MMS has really helped that as well with the municipalities. As long as you're following the rules of the MMS, it doesn't eliminate your liability, but it really minimizes that liability that the municipality would have.
That's good, yeah.
And it also, I mean, you can also get caught on it too, right? Because it can actually show that you weren't in an area as well, right? Yeah. So that's
when the CD gets broken.
It's a double-edged sword on that one. Yeah. And I mean, lawyers are getting a lot smarter. I wouldn't say smarter, but they're getting craftier, right? Before they would strictly look at, oh, was the plow going? Okay, great. Yeah. And they'd try and disprove or prove that we were there, right? Then they started looking at, okay, well, now we have a GPS that shows that it was there. Well, how much material are we putting down? Well, we're putting down this. Okay, so why were you putting that much? What's the going standard for putting down material? What's the average? And why did you make that decision? So they're getting craftier. Like, it's almost like a revolving situation where we come up with something new, they tackle it, and all of a sudden we have to come up with something new to tackle that, and it just keeps going back and forth. And
they wouldn't be lawyers if they didn't, right?
And you see that in the MMS, right? All the updates that we've had in the MMS has been to help mitigate some of that situation where we've lost some lawsuits due to some of these holes that we had, and so we try to fill those holes, and all of a sudden there's another hole, right? So
the MMS is a good point, a good way to actually transition to the next area I want to talk about. That's road treatment strategies. And I mean, I know the MMS comes in big when you're developing your strategies. Also, how much material you're putting down as well has to factor into the strategies. I mean, different areas probably and different road types require different amounts of media to go down. So I mean, I guess like once the winter season's over and you're planning for the next one, what are you looking at in terms of strategies?
A lot of times when we're looking at our strategies, I mean, material is based on a lot of times type of roadway that we're on, level of service that we're looking on that roadway, right? So we're not putting down salt on a Class 6 roadway, right? We're putting down sand. And so when that season ends, we start to look at our traffic patterns. Do we have any roadways that have jumped from a Class 5 to a Class 4 or 4 to a 3? Do we need to change any of our strategies in the way of we're going to convert from sand over to salt? That basically plays into it. Anything else, it's kind of tough. I don't know.
Has weather patterns?
Weather patterns.
Because I mean, like last year was a really, really mild winter, except for that one giant storm we got. When was it? January, February. For the most part, it was relatively mild. So are you looking at next season and thinking, okay, are we going to get the same mild weather, or should I reduce? Or
it's a crapshoot when you're looking at the weather, right? I mean, we've had situations where, oh my God, Snowmageddon's coming in, and we end up with a centimeter of snow, right? So the weather is changing, and it's changing a lot. We're finding a lot more. We get a snowfall or we get some kind of event, and within 2 or 3 days we're into a thaw.
Yeah.
Right? We're not getting into that deep freeze anymore in the past couple of years. Freezing rain's starting to become more prevalent as well, right? We're getting a lot of all of a sudden rain, freezing rain, snow, then back to freezing rain. Like the patterns are changing, the storms are changing, right? Where, we're going even 10 years or further, it snowed, you got 30 centimeters of snow, you plowed it off, you treated, and you're done, right? Now it's, okay, we're getting a little bit of rain. What are we going to do? Because there's freezing rain coming. So are we going to do any kind of pre-treating? But you got to judge the rain because it's going to dilute whatever you're putting down on the roadway. So do
Yeah.
you wait for the freezing rain before you treat, and then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, now we're going over to snow. So it is a challenge. The weather's becoming a big challenge in decision making, and
I guess that's where the technology, if somebody's out there looking for an idea, I mean, like find something that'll stick, that'll go through this rain and snow. And I mean, technology wise, all I'm thinking about is heating under the road. I mean, that's a lot of work.
There are a few places to do that, but it's pretty costly.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, it's the timing, knowing what's there.
Right.
And, we even saw it, that July 16th flood. Nobody predicted that until a half an hour before it got here.
Right.
So we're having the same issues in winter, and now we're starting to see those same issues in summer about the forecasts.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Darnell is the same, but I think there's 4 to 5 to maybe 7 different forecasts that we look at when it comes to winter. And we're getting updates 3 times a day from a weather service provider, as well as Environment Canada, as well as the Weather Network and all the other little AccuWeather things. And as one of my colleagues says, AccuWindow is one of the best ones, just looking out the window.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult piece when you get those challenges. I'd rather have 30 centimeters of snow than some of the stuff we dealt with last winter.
Right.
Because you don't know what product to put down because of the changing activities. To Darnell's point, you can't go and pre-treat when it's raining because everything is just going to wash away.
Yeah.
But you have to be out there once the freezing rain hits to make sure that the roads are safe.
And then you've also got to look at the environmental impact as well. I mean, you're putting all this salt down, and it's getting even in the brine, and it's getting washed off into our waterways. And I'm sure Environment Canada's on you guys about that too. So you've got to balance: am I putting on enough to stop cars from sliding off versus destroying the environment? There's got to be a fine line there that you guys are walking.
Yeah, and we do reporting to the Environment Canada every year about how much salt we use, where it's stored. There's a questionnaire that comes around to all the municipalities, so they're aware of what we do. But you're kind of trying to use best practices on especially the amounts of snow you're using.
Right.
Sorry, salt you're using. Because if you're going to get a big snowstorm, you're not going to go out with a heavy setting your first round. You just want to try to have a little trickle to break the bond between the snow and the road, and then be able to just plow everything off afterwards. So it's quite it's like building an orchestra or going through writing a book to kind of get it all out there. And things change as you go through it. It's not always the way you originally set it up, right?
So nothing's set in stone. You guys are rolling with the punches and taking the hits as they come, eh?
pretty much, yeah.
All right. I guess that brings me on to the next one. And it's great that you're both here because you're both from 2 different municipalities. So the challenges for urban versus rural, what do those look like? And I mean, I guess this is great for snow school too, because you're going to have people from urban municipalities and rural municipalities, and they're going to want to know specifically for their regions. And you guys both have that experience.
I think the thing that I've noticed the last 5-7 years is expectations of the residents. We start to get phone calls as soon as it stops snowing. Why isn't my little court plowed yet?
Right.
When we have levels of service where we, have 12 to 24 hours to do our arterials, our mains, our class 2s and 3s. And then when you get into the residentials, it's, anywhere from 24 to 36 hours. After the snow stops is our levels of service. And they think as soon as it stops snowing, well, you should be out here, doing my street. Why isn't my street done, right?
Yeah.
Dundas is done. Why isn't my little court? So that's the education piece that we try to put out to the public so they're aware.
Oh, geez. Yeah, so you were talking about... actually, no, let's go into the rural side. Darnell, what are some of the challenges you see that aren't necessarily in a urban setting like Mississauga? And I know Mississauga is huge, and there are a lot of people there, and they expect you to be at their door like that, but... I mean, obviously you can't, but on a rural setting, it's got to be a little bit more different, right?
It is. The expectation, as Scott mentioned, from residents is still there, and it keeps increasing, right? Long gone are the days of hard packed roads. So they're looking for that bare pavement, and why isn't it bare pavement yet? And obviously, in an urban setting, we have buildings that kind of protect our roadways. So if we burn it off, it's not coming back, essentially, right?
Right.
In a rural setting, right, when we get those storms and we are plowing constantly back and forth, putting down material, but we have winds, depending on what there is for fields, how open they are, right? We do have snow fencing, but there's all these other challenges when it comes to a rural road, when we're getting through those storms, because you just can't keep them as clear as you can an urban road.
Right, exactly.
When we're going back to weather patterns and not getting into that deep freeze anymore, we're having a hard time keeping our shoulders clean. So essentially what we want is to have a frozen shoulder so that we can put the wing down and wing back and widen out the roadway so that, when we do get those winds, the drifting starts off ditch wise, then onto the gravel and before it hits the road. Well, with the soft shoulders that we constantly have now, because we're not getting that freeze, those drifts are now starting off in the road already, right?
Oh, wow.
So it makes things a little, it's a challenge. It's a challenge in the rules setting right now.
Yeah.
And then even with those soft shoulders, we're casting off stone, right? Newly reconstructed roadways that we've rebuilt over the summer,
Yeah.
fresh gravel, and all of a sudden the wing is actually taking that off, throwing it into the ditch. Wings are getting caught in the gravel, and if a wing gets caught in the gravel, it's usually when you get a plow truck that swings, ends up in the ditch, and then you're pulling vehicles out of the ditches.
And that's expensive too. You're
yeah,
replacing wings and blades.
Exactly. We actually had in Norfolk just last season here, someone who complained it's a rural road. Their house sits quite close to the road, and the stones cast off actually broke their front windows.
Oh, wow.
So it is difficult. I mean, you got mailboxes, you got where people are putting their garbage and recycling and weaving in and out of that. So it's a different challenge. We have the urban setting as well, but the rule is totally different, and you got to train that way as well, right? So
Exactly, yeah.
plow drivers is used to being in town, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, so and so called in sick. I need you to go out into one of the rural routes, and even just that conversion of going from one area to the next, you got to know. What are you doing? What can you do that you can't do in town? And then you can do it in the rural settings, your turnarounds, right? Because now all of a sudden in an urban setting, you usually tend to go in circles, right?
Yeah.
You always return back to the same spot. Well, in a rural setting, your route could end up at an intersection, and now you have to tuck in, make sure there's no vehicles coming, right? Do your awareness of your surroundings, reverse, and then go back down that roadway, right? So there's challenges.
That's crazy.
The other big thing that we face is parked cars. Darnell talked about recycling. Those are always a challenge because it always seems to snow on recycling day or garbage day. But parked cars in our smaller residential areas are also a challenge. So we're trying to get maybe parking on one side of the street implemented, or I don't think we would ever have no parking on any one of the streets. But that's another issue. And sometimes you get a car parked on both sides of the road, and we can't get our plow through.
Oh, wow.
So we have to Darnell's point, back up and turn around, and then you get a call later, well, my street wasn't plowed, right? And then we tell the operators to let the supervisor know.
Right.
So then at least we know the roads that there was parked cars, it was an issue, and then we can send somebody out, take a photo, and here's the reason why. So that was a big issue for our drivers in the local roads.
Oh, that makes sense. Do your drivers have training in dealing with public? I know last year, a couple of years ago, there was an incident where somebody came out and threatened a driver.
That was ours. Yeah.
Was that yours?
Yeah, we actually had 6 drivers from a contractor quit in one event.
Yeah.
Because they had residents coming out with shovels, standing in front of the plow. One of them actually had their toddler in their hands, standing in front of the plow coming down the street.
Wow.
Because they didn't want the windrow from them plowing. So we tell all of our operators, don't interact, just tell them to call 311.
Yeah.
And if they don't feel safe, to call the police, right? Depending on what's happening. So luckily that was a one-off, but it was very unfortunate and very scary.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. These guys are trying to do their job. And,
exactly.
I mean, I get it. You hate the windrows. You hate that. You just shoveled your driveway and you got more in there. But I mean,
but it's not a new concept.
No,
right?
it's
This
not.
has been around for over 100 years.
Yeah,
I don't
kids
know why
make their
all of
money
a
on
sudden
that.
It's a big issue. But
you send your kid out there, or you get the neighborhood kid. You pay him $10 to finish it off.
Yeah.
But
the public seems to not remember that the people in the plow trucks have to go home and do their driveways as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. They
So
don't
they've been plowing all day, and they've plowed in their own driveways, and they
Yeah.
got to go and clean them out, right? So it's it's funny. I mean, our drivers have had snow brushes, right? Someone's finished cleaning their driveway, and now they're wiping off their car that's on the street, and here comes the plow, and they throw their snow brush at the plow truck, right?
Yeah.
Or all of a sudden the shovel gets thrown. It's crazy. We've had winter for as long as everyone's lived here, right?
This is Canada, guys.
Hasn't changed. If anything, we're getting less snow. So those windrows are actually getting smaller, right? Long gone are the days of the 6-foot windrow that would be left at the end of your driveway, right? So I mean, it's if a resident can plan, wait for the plow to go by if they can or whatever, and right, it makes life easier. But they got to understand we have to put the snow somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
We just can't miraculously melt the snow as we're going down the street or leave it in the middle of the roadway, right?
I mean,
it has to go somewhere.
Those vehicles are not so nimble that they can like pick it up and put it on your lawn for you. But
we get that complaint as well. We always get the complaint. They didn't put any in front of my neighbors. It all ended up at my house. And it's like, well, I'm pretty sure they didn't lift the plow.
Yeah.
And then just drop it just so they could put it in front of your house, right? It's
not everybody's out to get you.
No.
I mean, one of the things I'll do is I'll go out and I'll plow the front little part of the road in front of my driveway, and I'll put it all on my lawn and everything like that. But that way, when the plow comes by, my windrow is significantly smaller, if at all.
Yep.
And then my neighbor has to do theirs.
Yeah. And remind your neighbors, push everything if you're facing the road, to the right side.
Yeah.
Because then you don't get it. Your neighbor might get it,
Yep.
but it's just a little trick to push all that snow the way the plow is going on the street.
But I mean, it takes me 5 minutes to go out onto the road and shovel everything back and onto the pile, onto the boulevard, and not have to worry about it. And then I get my car over it when I come back. But that's actually a huge topic. And we talk about that in snow school too, right? That's probably something that was just added, I'm sure, by your experience.
For the windrows? Or
No, for
the residents?
Communications with residents.
Yeah, that piece is in there,
Yeah, that almost has to be, because it's been such a big deal. And that was like, I almost want to call it tragic because of how it happened last year, and it just really shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on, all of this, the big picture, this costs money. What is budgeting like for this? I mean, I know you guys were talking about getting salt early in the season to save a little bit of money, and I mean, what are your budgets like? What do you have to plan for? And I mean, you're trying to get cheap salt, so I'm guessing everything's kind of tight.
Yeah, it depends on the size of your operation. Like, our budget's going to be a little bit bigger than Darnell's. Like, I think right now, my annual cost for winter with all of our contractors, and even including salt, would be somewhere $24-25 million.
Wow.
But it's pretty good pricing when you look at how we got all the vehicles and everything. So
yeah,
it's a big chunk of the operation, and it's something that we have to do based on getting people around, the legislation that's in place, and trying to make the roads and the active transportation and our bus network safe for our residents to be able to get around.
Yeah. Oh, that's another one I want to ask, actually. Active transportation. Sorry, I'm getting off here. I'll write that down. We'll come back to it. So with like a $24 million budget, how does what do you like at the end of the season? Are you like right up against the cap, or does that give you a little bit of wiggle room if, say, Snowmageddon March comes and you need that little extra bit of salt?
Yeah, so we've been lucky because we've got also like a winter reserve.
Okay.
That we've been, anytime that you have a couple years that are better than the others, we have the reserve account that's strictly for winter. So it's helped us if we're increasing operations or if we do have one of those heavy years. But there's quite I think it's about $10 million is actually in our winter reserve.
Okay, that's good.
And you get a winter like we had last year, you're going to save some money. But what a lot of people don't understand is a contract is set up. 75% of the cost is your standby just to have the contractor there.
Yeah, definitely.
So even though you have a big savings, you can only really save on 25% of the contract, right?
Right.
So we never had a full plowing event at all last year in Mississauga.
Wow.
Some of our equipment in the south, our loaders that help with the courts and the cul-de-sacs, they never left the yard the entire year.
Wow.
We still saved a couple $1 million on the contract. So you get those lighter seasons that help with the overall, and ours is an 8-year contract.
Yeah.
So it helps having that extended contract that the lean years can help the heavy years over the length of the contract.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So for a smaller municipality, I guess with a smaller budget, how do we work with that, Darnell?
So our budget is a little smaller than Scott's. We're probably on average 6 to 8 million. One thing that we have been trying to do and convince council on the past couple of years is to get a reserve like Scott has. Right. So when we get those later years, we're funneling that money into an account. So when you get that every year, you have it there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we haven't gone that route yet. And in the area that we're in, it's difficult to budget because we can go from a year where we're very light to a year that you're very heavy, right?
Yeah.
And so,
well, with the unpredictability of weather nowadays, like, I mean, we had a light year last year. We can all agree on that. But I mean, who knows if things shift and all of a sudden we get dumped on every day next year?
Yeah, it's not easy, and we have a small tax base, right?
Yeah.
We only have population in Norfolk County. I think is around 67,000 right now, right? So we have a large road network with a very small tax base, and so we have to be careful with our dollars. You don't want to have an 8% tax increase on your residents, right? So we got to pinch that money, and basically what we've done recently is we're just taking your 5-year average, right?
Yep.
How much have we spent in the 5 years and averaging it and then adding a little cushion. And the one question you ask is, what do you do when you're riding that fine line? Well, at the end of the day, we're not going to keep the plows in the yard if we get a snow event, right?
Yeah.
If you have to overrun that budget, you're going to overrun that budget. And
Right.
it's happened to us. Years, I'd say 7-8 years ago, we ran over our budget by about 25%.
Wow.
Right.
But I mean, it's got to be done, right?
It's got to be done,
Yeah.
right? It's not like all of a sudden, oh, it's February 2nd, no more snow plowing, right? Like it just doesn't happen. So you got to have that backup plan. And like I said, we're trying to get ourselves into a reserve situation like Scott has and dedicating that money. So, but it is tough when you have a smaller tax base. It's harder to, you have to be, I think, a little tighter,
Right.
just so you're not taxing your residents, right? And
Exactly. Yeah. You gotta be careful with the money too, because then they'll get upset with like a 25 or 8% increase, and that's not good. So I'm gonna circle back to a thought I had earlier that I just sort of popped into my head. Active transportation, clearing roads for that. We're talking like cycling networks, buses, walking paths. How does that factor into everything you guys do? I mean, I know those are challenges unto themselves, especially like if you have curbed bike lanes where you've got that small little half lane that bikes can go down. A regular plow's not going to fit down there.
Yeah, and we have started recently having very candid conversations with our active transportation department, because a lot of the times they would put in some new bike lanes and we wouldn't find out until September, October.
Oh.
And I don't have the proper equipment to be able to do that. So we've been really working hand in hand with them to make sure if they are putting it on the road, if it's a separated bike lane, with other bollards or some sort of delineation, making sure it's wide enough that I can get a piece of equipment in there.
Right.
Not just for winter, but also for the summer and the spring for street cleaning and sweeping and stuff like that. You can't just think of it for winter. And we also have on the active transportation, our LRT is being constructed, the Hazel McCallion line.
Right.
With that on the boulevards, it's almost going to be all hard surface, where you got the train in the middle, the cars, and then you're going to have bike lane and a multi-use trail up on the boulevard. So there we've had to think a lot of snow removal.
Yeah.
Because if I'm pushing it from the road onto the bike lane and the bike lane onto the multi-use trail, and then I don't have any right-of-way left, that whole 21-kilometer length of Hurontario, we've kind of forecasted to do snow removal on that once it gets up and running, which I think will be sometime next year. It's supposed to be this fall, but it's not quite there yet. So.
Okay.
So the key is to have that discussion and communication with your active transportation team.
Yeah.
To make sure that So now I tell them that they have to let me know by July and August.
Yeah, it's just good
whether
communication.
It's even sidewalks, right?
Yeah.
If you're expanding sidewalks or multi-use trails, because anything in the right of way, my team will do. Our parks network is done by our parks operations team.
Right.
So they give us that information so we can update our mapping and make sure that the routing is in place for the vehicles that are doing those routes.
Right. And in a rural setting, I know that's not much of an issue, but
we are lucky. Active transportation, and at least in Norfolk, I mean, in our urban settings, we don't have much. We have a few trails and pathways that run through our towns,
right.
But actually dedicated bike lanes or anything like that in the urban settings, we do not have yet. In the rural areas, we won't call them bike lanes, we call them paved shoulders.
okay.
Right? So it's a little loophole that's currently that currently exists, right? But in the rule settings, even if they were dedicated bike lanes, it makes life a lot easier, right? It's basically throw down your wing and you're plowing that off. There's no delineators or anything like that in the rule setting that's separating your driving lane versus your bike lane, where you see in the urban settings where they have the delineators up in the air that people are constantly smacking, or some kind of curbing or anything like that, right? You don't have that in the rule setting, so.
I get the plus side of the curbing. I mean, it keeps the bikes on one side, the cars on the other. But yeah, you look into plows and things like that, and I don't think they're going to build a wing with a little gap in it just for that curb. I mean, I've seen. I was in Simcoe County last winter, and they had the little sidewalk cleaners there. And I was thinking that would be fantastic for bike lanes because, I mean, sidewalks aren't much bigger than, aren't much smaller. But
that's what we try to use. But if you've got a plow truck that's putting 2 lanes of snow into that bike lane, your little 40 horsepower tractor is not going to be able to do that. So that's the other conversation we have to have with our teams. Okay, what's happening there because I don't have the proper equipment to be able to do it. So that's a big key thing to make sure that everybody understands exactly the operation and what's happening.
So just thinking outside, well, not even outside the box, but I know a bunch of European countries do this too, where they don't actually push the snow to the side, they pick it up and move it somewhere else. I'm guessing that's a lot more cost prohibitive. Is there any other any advantages to that? I mean, I know you're talking about the Hazel McCallion line and just pushing it over to where it can't go anymore.
Yeah, so there's obviously advantages getting rid of the snow because then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a huge cost, and you also have to have the space to be able to put the snow once you truck it away somewhere.
Right.
And you have to make sure that that space is set up properly under the MECP, Ministry of Environment, to capture any of the contaminants that are coming out of it before it goes in there. So
I remember seeing an article last year about Japan just dumping it into the ocean.
Montreal used to do that back in the day into the St. Lawrence River, right? So
and then you've got all
can't do that anymore.
Solids, contaminants, and whatnot.
We used to dump it into Lake Erie. We used to dump it into the rivers, right? Those days are long gone, right? So I mean, for you to pick up your snow and remove it, yes, it's advantageous, especially in the downtown cores.
Right.
You know, your businesses love it. There's no windrows. People can get out of the car straight into the shops, right?
Yeah.
But like Scott says, you now have to have that snow dump site that needs to meet certain regulations, right, and certain design criteria. And how big do you make it? Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because I mean, if you look at Quebec City and Montreal, if you Google their snow dump sites, like you're talking like 4 stories high.
Wow.
And the equipment to even be able to pilot that high, right? Like you look at the blowers on some of the front end loaders that they have, and they're shooting snow 50, 60 feet up in the air to try and pilot, right? So
and then it doesn't finish melting until mid-July.
That's pretty much Quebec City on a heavy winter. They're probably melting just as the first snowfall's coming, right?
Wow.
Like that's how much snow is there, right? And the land, like where do you find this land? Like I mean, me in a rural area, I'll have an easier time finding a large piece of land to create a snow dump. But like City of Mississauga, where are you going to find prime location to have a snow dump that you're not hauling the snow 50 kilometers away, right? So you need to have something more local, and development is eating anything up that's available, right? So
that's true. Yeah.
We borrow some of the parking lots of our from our recreation or parks facilities that aren't used, like baseball diamonds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But to Darnell's point, we've had it hasn't been for a couple of years, but we started getting calls in April, late March and early April. Okay, we're ready to start maintaining our ball diamonds in there, and in the parking lot there's 6 feet of snow still, right? So we had to go and actually move it to a different location because it hadn't melted yet because we had that much. So yeah, we have a handful of locations that we can use.
Yeah.
But if we start getting the snow again with the LRT coming on board, it's not going to be enough for what we need. So we're always actively looking. We're talking with our neighboring municipalities because they're looking as well. With Peel Region being in Mississauga, they have roads in Mississauga, so we're trying to partner on finding a place where we'll split the cost. But when you tell council or somebody that you need $3 million just to buy a piece of land to put snow, there's not a lot of what a great idea, so that's the difficult piece, letting them understand our operation to make it work.
Right. Wow. Okay. Before we wrap it up, what are some of the lessons you've learned from past winters? I know we've got a lot of experience in this room, and I'm sure you've all seen a lot. We've mentioned other municipalities, other countries, other provinces. All of that. What are some lessons you've learned from past winters that people can take forward?
No winter's the same, right? No winter's the same. What you anticipate and expect one winter, the next winter can be totally different, right? It's all you can do is try to be prepared, have your staff trained, make sure you have what you need in place, and if you don't have it, be ready for it the next year, right? It's unfortunate, and as I mentioned before, with our weather patterns changing, it's difficult. It's very difficult to anticipate what are we going to have next year, right? Even we have everybody. Oh, the Farmer's Almanac says such and such. Well, the Farmer's Almanac isn't as accurate anymore, right? You can't anticipate those things. So they're calling for more of a slushy winter this year. Well,
what does that mean exactly?
What does that mean exactly? Like, is it going to be more of just a rain winter, or all of a sudden it's a 180? You're expecting one thing, and all we do is get snow after snow after snow, right? So, lesson learned: no winter's the same. Just be prepared for the unexpected.
The only thing that I'd add to that is a communication piece. Over the last 6 years, I've actually been doing updates to mayor and council and our executive team at the city.
Right.
So they know when we go out. They know when our levels of service come into play. So it's like once the snow stops, that's when the timer starts.
Okay.
So I give them an update on that during the operation, and then at the end of the event, like, hey, we're done, or the levels of services are out. And then, any service requests or complaints, they can start coming through. So you can't give them enough information to help you through the operation. And I've actually had a lot of them be thankful for that, because then if they get a call from a resident, they've got all that information right there.
Yeah.
And we even send it to our 311 team, so they get all that information. So even before it gets to a council, if just a resident is calling, they can update them on all that information as well. So that, as part of the lessons, like, you learn as you go, and nothing is, even one event isn't the same, let alone year to year.
Yeah.
The communication, I find, is key, putting it out, and also between the team that's actually the boots on the ground, making sure that everybody's aware of what's going on.
That's fantastic advice. That's keep the entire team up to date. So, all right. So we've got two snow school directors here. Before we leave, is there anything you want to tell anybody about snow school, about your municipalities, about operations? A couple minutes.
Basically, snow school's been around for many years. It's a award-winning course through Good Roads. I've been sitting on it now. I think this is going to be my 16th year.
Nice.
So this year I'm the director of snow school now, since Emil Marion has retired and moved on to easier lifestyle, I guess we'll call it. And Scott has come on as the vice director. So it's a great course. Any municipality, and even, as you mentioned before, like contractors, we've had the 407 attend.
Right.
We've had lawyers attend. Actually, I think we had one lawyer
Once.
sneak in without us knowing that he was a lawyer.
Yeah, I'd be a little bit nervous about that.
But the private sector, we've had consultants, engineers come in and take the course. It's a great course, and it's good from your truck driver right up to your management, right? Like, it's...
And year over year too, right? It's not just a one-off.
Yep. It's
because, like you said, every winter's different. We got to be prepared for everything.
And we try to keep it up to date, right? So as things change, we're constantly updating Snow School to meet the demands of what's happening today, right? So, there's topics that were relevant 15 years ago that we've dropped off and replaced with something else, right? So, like, active transportation is a really big one in Snow School right now, and the whole GPS AVL.
Yep.
All right, those are the two big ones right now. It's a great course for everyone, and recommend it for anybody. And then we also have the mechanics side.
Yeah.
Back when I first took the course, I actually took the mechanics portion, because back then Snow School was Snow School, and I think it was on the second or third day for the afternoon. If you wanted the mechanics side, you'd go off to a different room, and everybody else would stay in another room. And so it was a combined thing. And then more or less 5 years after that is where we kind of started looking at, okay, we need to have a whole separate mechanic side of things, because they're looking at something different, right? It's a totally different ballgame for them. And so for mechanics, if municipality has new mechanics coming on, or mechanics that have never dealt with winter operations and winter equipment, it's a great course for them. Helps them troubleshoot the equipment, helps them troubleshoot the controllers. We're getting more and more computerized systems into the vehicles, right? So it's a different ballgame for them. And one thing that we find, at least in Norfolk, is having that mechanic, having the understanding why we need that piece of equipment repaired ASAP.
Yeah.
Right? Like when we're in the middle of snowfall and something breaks down and we call in the mechanic, like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. Well, no, this is why we need it right now, right? And it gives them that understanding. Okay, wait a minute. This is an important piece of day-to-day activity for winter maintenance, right? So it's a great course for the mechanics as well.
One of the things I understand about that too is a lot of municipalities were calling the company who made, like, say, the spreader to come out and, I guess, recalibrate or fix it or what have you. And I mean, you have every other municipality in Ontario, 444, calling you to fix your spreader, and they can only get to one at a time, right? So you're not going to be sitting there for 3 weeks with a down truck and saying, well, what do we do now? You've got to have that fixed. Your mechanics get the idea that, yes, this is urgent. Yes, we need this to fix it. This is a good idea of how to do it or what you're looking for or what you want to do. And you can get your truck back on the road like that.
Yeah, and the mechanics course does cover all the major controllers that are out on the market. I mean, there's still could be one-offs, but the major players in controllers, they're covered in the mechanics course. So they get an understanding of all those controllers, right, depending on what their municipality is using.
Terrific. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up for there today. Thank you both for stopping by, talking to us about snow school and what should hopefully be another mild winter, fingers crossed. For everybody else out there, if you like the show and you're on YouTube, click the like button. If you have any questions for Darnell or Scott, leave them in the comments there. I'll get them to them as soon as I can. We'll try and get back to you. Hit the subscribe button, helps the algorithm. I know a lot of people who aren't subscribed watch this show, so that'll help us out a lot. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram for up-to-date information on everything at Good Roads. And yeah, like I said, take a look at everything else on YouTube. We leave a lot of good information and content to help you run your municipality as efficiently as possible. And until next time, everybody, take it easy.